Henry Cejudo, who has really become a hot coach, right? I mean, we find out one day Henry's going into coaching. I didn't really know what that meant because I know a lot of guys that have opened gyms. They got their name on, oh, so-and-so opened a gym, but they didn't. Maybe they put up some money, but sometimes they didn't. Somebody else came in and is just going to give them a little bit of equity as long as they use their name and let them train there, and somebody else runs it, and that's completely fine. This is a very normal thing. I'm just sharing for you that when Henry did this, when Henry's name gets put that he's going to be a trainer and he's doing a job, I thought maybe it was one of those situations. And then Henry gets in the room, and then he has these athletes coming in from all over the world. He got athletes praising him. He almost had Prohaska. You want to talk about all the world champions that Henry said? You will go your whole career and you won't have a world champion. If you have a world champion, you go into a very rare and elite set of coaches. If you're going to train a guy and you fight for world championship, it's really rare, right? Henry, within his first year, he's got Weili in there. Now, I mean, it's a question of, is Jon Jones going to go back? It's as simple as that. Jon Jones prepared with Henry. If he returns, Henry can claim him. He's going to have Jon Jones too. Prohaska tried to come in. It was some kind of like an airplane issue, if I remember right. So Prohaska didn't get them, but that would have been another world champion. Then you got Figueiredo. I'm not telling you, you get one, and you have done a really good job. You were in a rare club. Henry in his first year? What? You know, he's at this a good 2 years now, but you understand my point. What? How did he do this? Then Henry even gets in and start giving advice out. He started giving advice to Conor McGregor, if you guys will remember, and Conor did not appreciate it. Do you guys remember this? But then it started getting real sophisticated. It wasn't just Henry poking at him. He was talking about distance, and he was actually telling him some stuff. Even if he was trying to be condescending to him, you start reading and going, man, that's a really good analysis. That's interesting, Henry. And one thing that Henry did work with Jon Jones on was range. It was the number one thing he worked on him with. He had different patterns and he had different movements. He didn't work him. He didn't get him tired. He didn't get him dragging out of the ring. He wanted to work on him with range. And you saw what Jon Jones did so well Saturday was with his range. He threw it 2 straight down the middle. As a matter of fact, he threw it twice. He changed elevation one time. He got the taking right where he was. Can I credit Henry? I'm sure plenty of guys go into that. I'm just sharing for you. This is now a guy that has a right to an opinion, and he's given another one. Henry gave an opinion on Sunday morning. He said for Bo Nickal to take 6 more fights before he fights anybody in the top 10. Now, anytime somebody says something right, you got to look one step further. So it's kind of like I just said with Henry, and Henry's going after Conor McGregor. You have to look one step further, because then it turns out Henry wants to fight Conor McGregor. Remember, you start to see just what's going on here. Henry's a wrestler. Bo Nickal's a wrestler. There's a code. There's an honor. Henry's an Olympic champion. Chael Sonnen is the Olympic champion. Chael Sonnen is the coach of Bo Nickal. I mean, there's just things there where Henry would not say that unless he believed it. So why did he say it? Well, he actually finished that thought. Do you want to know what he said? He said, Bo worked real hard for that takedown. Okay. I'm not saying the whole thing so you hear it at once. Bo Nickal needs 6 more fights before he takes on anybody in the top 10. He worked real hard for that takedown. I would like to stay on that because it's a mistake that wrestlers make. It's very interesting in MMA how you're going to wrestle and who you're listening to and why wrestling works. It's interesting because the single best wrestler our sport has ever seen by the numbers is George St. Pierre, who's never once had a wrestling match. And the guy that had the most takedowns and the most time on top and the most control next to George St. Pierre is a guy named Khabib Nurmagomedov, who that I know of never had a wrestling match. I know Khabib trained. I know about Dagestan. I know he was in the room. I don't think he ever had a wrestling match. That's interesting. The single greatest MMA wrestler of all time is George St. Pierre, they're known as Singlet. The next greatest MMA wrestler of all time is Khabib Nurmagomedov, that doesn't know a singlet. That's interesting. Considering Kevin Jackson has fought, considering Kenny Monday has fought, considering Mark Schultz has fought, considering Mark Coleman and Randy Couture and Daniel Cormier and Yoel Romero. How are those guys not the best? As a matter of fact, last time I saw Yoel Romero in the UFC, he fought a kickboxer and he never got him down once. How does that work? How does that work? How does an Olympic medalist wrestler from Cuba not take a kickboxer down in 25 minutes? I'm not giving anybody a hard time. I'm not complimenting Adesanya's takedowns, and I'm not insulting Yoel's. I'm bringing it to your attention of what wrestling is in MMA. It's not what you see on the mat. It's not what they do in the junior highs or the clubs or the high schools they give scholarships for in the NCAA. It's not what they contest in the Olympic Games in freestyle or Greco-Roman. What is wrestling? I have to give this speech. I give this speech in summer camps when I go and work with kids, and I just remind them what wrestling is. But I ask them first. I ask a room full of wrestlers. I got champions, and I got these really good wrestlers in there. But I'll ask them, what does wrestling mean? And nobody has an answer. Nobody knows. They know what it is, but they don't know what it means. Wrestling means to move. If a coach yells wrestle, they're telling you to move. Move. Do anything. If you wrestled harder than that guy wrestled, you know what it means? It means you moved more. If you got a guy in practice, you go, man, that guy, he outworked everybody. It means he moved more. That's all wrestling is. Now, we came up with a point system. We came in with some techniques, some exposures, and what a pinfall is. That's not what wrestling means. That's how it's contested, and I bring it to you. It's very important, and guys don't understand this, and you'll get a guy that wasn't very good in wrestling. He'll take everybody down, but he'll understand posture. He'll understand range. And the really, really greats, the guys that came in and went further than anybody, they understand something that other wrestlers don't. And I bring this in because it had to do with what Henry said. Henry said Bo worked very hard for the takedown. Stay on that. Because Henry's an Olympic champion. I've seen Henry do this too. He's striking or he's trying to take somebody down. But if he doesn't get the takedown, he's back to striking. That's wrestlers. They're touching you. They're wrestling. They don't have to be on top. That is the misunderstanding that so many of the greats come in with. Olympic and world medalists will come in thinking their wrestling has only worked if they went from an open range to a top position. I can close the distance from here to here and never even go below your waist. I can come right into an underhook. I am now wrestling. But when you try to break away, I got to come to a collar. I've got to push you, and then I've got to pull you. I'm going to push you until you stop me, and then I'm going to pull you until you stop, and then I'm going to push you again. But I'm now wrestling. I don't ever have to get on top of you. So when you deal with these guys, like, say, Robert Whittaker, say, Jose Aldo, they're really hard to take down. Wrestling stars can't take them down, and they've never wrestled before. When you deal with those guys, quit attacking their hips. Quit hitting double legs. You don't need them. You don't need Meskers and inside trips and front headlocks. You don't ever have to get the guy down, but you got to understand that concept. And the first to understand that concept was in 1997, and his name was Randy Couture. And he fought a guy named Vitor Belfort. They advertised Vitor Belfort. And they said he had no known weaknesses. And do you want to know who said that about him? Jeff Blatnick. Jeff Blatnick was an Olympic wrestling champion and said that Vitor had no known weaknesses. And Randy went out, and guess what Randy couldn't do? He couldn't take him down. But he wrestled him nonstop, which means he didn't stand here. He grabbed him. He grabbed his wrist. He grabbed his collar. He grabbed an underhook. He pushed him until he stopped the pushing, and then he pulled him until he stopped the pulling. So then he started pushing him again. I mean, it's very basic concepts that you do in wrestling, but they don't teach it in MMA, and they don't teach it in MMA because they don't understand it. You're not going to understand it unless you've done it. But if you do it and you've been on the grind and you understand, man, if I've got a hold of you, if I'm pushing and pulling, I'm wearing you down. If I've taken that distance, you're not striking me, and I'm now in control. When you understand those things, that's what a wrestler does. So that's what a wrestler will do in the Olympics. That's what they will do in the US Open. That's what they will do in the NCAA. It is not what they will do in the cage because they don't understand it. So when Henry talks about that takedown was hard, I don't say that Henry's wrong. But the concept is wrong if you believe that a wrestler ever has to take you down to be wrestling.